about Republicans, Democrats, independents, and all this.
Don't you get it, Jerry?
No.
I do get it.
No.
Good morning. Civil war, a bloody weekend of sectarian clashes in Iraq.
Terror, horror, death. Film at 11.
Jerry Doyle grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Has a 10-year career on Wall Street. A long list of movie and TV roles, including the character Michael Garibaldi for 110 episodes on the Emmy Award-winning sci-fi series Babylon 5. He's an honorary naval aviator and F-16 test pilot.
Impressive.
And ran as a Republican for the U.S. House of Representatives in California.
King. Well, I didn't vote for you.
You want to talk politics, pop culture, and current events?
What's your language, you bud? We're on the air.
Let's do it on the Jerry Doyle Show.
Let's do it on the Jerry Doyle Show. JD here. Your 6'3", ATM of information. The PIN 800-876-4123. Charles and Jesse work in the booth. Dyslexic Doug grabbing your phone calls at 800-876-4123. Emails at the website jerrydoyle.com. The program where intellectual anarchy is encouraged and nurtured. Here's what I'm encouraging. Let's get the troops home right now. We're done. The war is over. For 5 weeks, I have been telling you, battling with you, responding to emails and phone calls that the fix was in back then. When President Bush capitulated in that interview, when asked whether what we were seeing take place in Baghdad was equivalent to the 1968 Tet Offensive, and he said, well, you know, he might have been right. Might have been right about that. That was the time when the fix was in. 5 weeks ago, I had Colonel David Hunt on the program. He's going to be joining us in a little bit, bottom of the hour, to talk to us about the fix being in. Every day, more and more information comes out to prove to you that the fix is in. The war is over for political purposes. They're all running for political cover. People are trying to find ways to position themselves for 2008. I'm reading a story here about Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House. Newt Gingrich now says, after the election, mind you, that the Iraq war is a failure. And unless the Bush administration admits to this failure, it will not be able to enter the third phase, which is to do what? Is to put Doughboy Gingrich in position to be able to tell you that, see, I told you so, and because Bush didn't admit that this was a failure, you need a guy like me to be the president because I'm going to shoot straight with you, even though I didn't shoot straight with you on November 6th, the day before the election. There's a report out, ABC News. Today, Iranian weapons arm Iraqi militia. U.S. officials say today, hey, guess what? We found evidence that there was direct Iranian support for terrorists in Iraq, brand new weapons seized from Iranian factories. The sources say the material is going directly from Iranian factories to Shia militias rather than through the black market. And they say, quote, there is no way this could be done without Iranian government approval. Yet only on Sunday, we had General Abizaid on 60 Minutes saying, let me be very clear about this. Let me be very clear. We are not at war with Iran, even though the correspondent said. So let me get this straight. So we've got the Iranians giving weapons to the militias in Iraq that are killing U.S. soldiers, but we're not at war with Iran. He said, no, we're not at war with Iran. And why would he say that? Because the fix was in. He was told to not make the connection between the United States and Iran. Why did Dick Cheney go to Saudi Arabia? To try and buy time, to say, here's what we need to do, guys, because we're all going to be pulling out soon, and we got to make sure that our interests are protected. Did he go over and try and broker a way to get the Saudis involved to have us win the war in Iraq and Afghanistan? No. He went over there because the fix was in. Condoleezza Rice over there not spreading democracy, spreading the image that we're over there doing everything we possibly can to put our soldiers in the best position to win the war. Republicans coming out and saying, guess what? I think we should contemplate negotiating directly with Iran and Syria. And 4 months ago, 5 months ago, when Democrats said the very same thing leading up to the midterm elections, the Democrats were accused of being traitors, of being cowards and appeasers and people who want to cut and run. Unlike the big, brave Republicans who said, no, we're going to stay the course. We're going to stay the course. Well, let's go back and listen to the rhetoric of how we're going to win and how we're going to stay the course and how forthright these Republicans, these conservatives on Capitol Hill are going to be with understanding how we have got to beat back the terrorists. Let's go back and listen to President Bush at the President's Dinner in June in clip 12.
An early withdrawal would embolden al-Qaeda and bin Laden. An early withdrawal before we completed the missions would say to the United States military, your sacrifices have gone to vain. There will be no early withdrawal so long as we run the Congress and occupy the White House.
And they cheered. And they cheered. And in clip 11, President Bush at this very same dinner says, you know what? An early withdrawal would be what for the United States of America, President Bush?
An early withdrawal would be a defeat for the United States of America. An early withdrawal would embolden the terrorists. Talk about a deadline before we've done the job sends chills throughout the spines of Iraqi citizens who are wondering whether or not the United States has the capacity to keep its word.
Do you, President Bush? 4th of July, President Bush talking about the sacrifice of 2,527 troops who died in Iraq would not be in vain. Is that not right, President Bush?
I'm going to make you this promise. I'm not going to allow the sacrifice of 2,527 troops who've died in Iraq to be in vain by pulling out before the job is done.
And after the canceled meeting with Maliki, after the 2.5-hour save-face meeting with Maliki where they emerged saying, he's the right guy for Iraq, you see. I appreciate the courage you showed during these difficult times as you lead your country. Now, see, we're not going to cut and run. We're going to stay here. We're going to stay here until the mission's done, see, because that's what we do. We don't cut and run. You see, and as long as we're here, we're not going to sacrifice these soldiers' lives in vain. And here's clip 1 of President Bush today talking at the press conference.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done.
We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done. That's what he said today. Only there was something just a little different that he put in. Here's the truth, that the fix is in.
So long as the government wants us there.
So long as the government wants us there. Jesse, play clip 1 in its totality, please.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there.
And after that 2.5-hour meeting, they came out and said, look, he's the guy. He's the guy. Al-Maliki said, look, there's no problem here. Everything's good. And what that meeting was all about was they were setting the timetable for when they were telling Maliki that he was going to tell us when it was time for our troops to leave. The fix is in. It has been in for 5 weeks. The peace with honor nonsense that they're talking about. And while politicians are positioning themselves for 2008, while they're trying to clean their hands and somehow distance themselves from this absolute horrific engagement that the military has been asked to participate in and not act like soldiers and not kill people and blow stuff up. These politicians are trying to find a way to somehow make you forget all the promises that were made, all the stuff we were going to do, all the greatness, the democracy that we were going to spread throughout the region. And now here we are, with everyone finding a way, just like this war has been used like a prostitute. Everyone, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, pro-war, anti-war, they have all used this war like a prostitute, and now that they're done with her, they've thrown her to the curb. And that's why I say the troops come home today. 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, your opinion.
Global war on terror. September the 11th. The terrorists running down the terrorists. Terror. The terrorists. September the 11th. Terrorism. The war on terror. The terrorists. War on terror. Terrorists. Osama bin Laden. The terrorists. 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 September the 11th. 2001. The terrorists. The terrorists. September the 11th. War on terror. Terrorists and insurgent. Terrorists. The terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists. The terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists. Fight against terror.
Stand up and be heard now on the Jerry Doyle Show.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there.
The Jerry Doyle Show. And now, 30 seconds of Jerry Doyle.
I have a solid belief that moderate middle America wants to be heard. And it's not Democrat or Republican. It's not left or right. It's not rich or poor. It's not black or white. It's not on any of the fringes. And again, I get back to the 80-20 rule. 10% on the left and 10% on the right exploit 80% of the moderate middle. And how does the 80% take control of the 80% and in some way relegate that 20% to the sidelines as best as possibly can happen?
President Bush's surprise message. America is addicted to...
I must have dreamed 1,000 dreams.
The war on terror.
Been haunted by a million screams.
Strategery.
I can hear the marching feet. They're moving into the street.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
Did you read the news?
I am so ticked off right now. Hold on a second. I got to put out my cigarette. I'm smoking during the show today because I'm really pissed off at the fact that people are callous to the fact that we have soldiers that are dying right now so politicians can position themselves. They're over there talking about how, well, we're going to train the Iraqis. You see, when we're being told by Maliki that, you know, we're going to get the equipment that they need. Bush is saying, well, you know, I appreciate the courage, Maliki, that you show during these difficult times as you lead your story. And then he says, you know, he's telling us that he just doesn't have the tools he needs to defend his people. October 18th, Wall Street Journal this year says they're nowhere even close to equipping the Iraqi forces and getting the army back up on its feet. They're not even close. They were sending people to a dinner with a 60-minute lecture and then sending them to Iraq to tell them how to stand up against terrorists? Now, supposedly, at Fort Riley, they're going through a 60-day training. Why? Don't waste your time. It's over. The fix is in. What they will do is they will prop up the Iraqi forces, the Iraqi army. The terrorists will get the wink and the nod from the Iranians, from Syria, from Hezbollah to stop fighting. It'll look like the Iraqi forces are beating back the terrorists. It will look like the time it's come for us to leave. Do you not see this? And if you don't see this, you tell me why we should keep one more soldier there when the fix is already in. 800-876-4123. Lansing, Michigan. Josh, WILS, line 10. Josh, you're on the program.
Yeah, I was debating entering the military a while back after watching some video of September 11th, and I was thinking long and hard about this, and I kind of came to a point where I ran into a brick wall and said to myself, what would I actually be doing as a member of the service? I'm very patriotic, and when I watch those videos, which you can't get on TV, I watched those videos of those planes on the internet, and it just kind of made me mad all over again from what happened on September 11th, and I wanted to contribute. And I'm very athletic, and I thought that that's a way I could do it, but I don't really see what we are doing in Iraq besides, as you mentioned, being sitting ducks, and it infuriates me that people are using this war as a whore, as a prostitute, as you mentioned, and I think that it's extremely frustrating for middle America and average people to say, what are we doing? Where are we attacking these terrorists? How are we fighting these terrorists? How can I help fight terrorists? How can I contribute? And if you think that, you can't vote to do it because the people that are running for political office are crooks. And you're exactly right on point. Thank you for your insight.
Thanks, Josh. You know, a guy like John McCain says, look, send more troops. You got Lindsey Graham, send more troops. When you look at people that are saying, we have to take a look at what we need to do here, the Republicans have walked on people in the Republican Party who say, look, the report's out saying if we send 15 to 20,000 more people and if we commit a couple of $1 billion more, then we might be able to brush this back. But we're not doing that. They're not listening to people in their own party. So let's take a look at this logically, okay? We now have proof. U.S. officials say they found evidence of a direct Iranian governmental support to kill U.S. soldiers in Iraq. Abizaid on 60 Minutes, with regard to the Revolutionary Guard, who he's pinning this on, says, no, let me make this clear. We're not at war with Iran. Listen to Abizaid on 60
Minutes. At the same time that the government of Iran is talking about stabilizing Iraq, these Revolutionary Guard Quds Force people are supporting the Shia death squads of some of the various splinter militias.
So aren't we already at a war with Iran and through its proxies in Iraq?
No, we're not at war with Iran through its proxies. We are in a period of making it clear to the Iranians that they need to move to help stabilize Iraq and not destabilize it.
But yet today, the report comes out, it says there is no way that this could be done without Iranian government approval. So we have confirmation that the Iranian government is involved in killing soldiers. Would you not think that we have a reason to go to war with Iran, but yet we had no proof to go to war with Iraq, and yet we went there? So why is it that Abizaid would make the comment to distance himself from the fact that Iran is killing U.S. soldiers? Why would that happen? Because the fix is in. Call me at 800-876-4123 is the number. San Francisco, California. Brian, KNEW Line 5, you're on the program.
Hi, Jerry. How you doing? My name is Brian. I'm calling to say, first off, I very much appreciate those Bush recordings that you played where he changes the rhetoric to until we're going to stay there till the job's done, and then he adds recently, I guess today, unless the government wants us to leave or whatever. I very much appreciate that. I'm a Green Party member, and I will say this right now. Thank you for doing that. And it's ironic, but this war is now at the point, come to the point where it's starting to bring Americans together, ironically, because people are starting to see that you're right. The fix is in here, and it's a sham. And I wanted to say, I really appreciate that.
And, I'm sad, Brian, that you're right, and I think I'm right, and others out there would probably disagree with that, is that, unfortunately, we're coming to the conclusion that the fix is in, and I'm sad that that might be the absolute truth. Because when you look at the number of soldiers that have given their lives, that have been separated from their families, the guys that are sitting in Walter Reed right now, for what?
Another irony is we can't go into Iran now because we went into Iraq. We have no credibility, we have no money, we have no military to do it. So the real place where it might have been necessary to go in militarily, Bush has now denied us. Thereby,
and we've spent $400 billion neutering President Bush. I mean, think about this, Brian. You got the President of the United States flying on Air Force One to meet with a guy recently elected and a constitution put together and a government formed in Iraq, a country of 25 million people. President Bush, the most powerful man in the world, is flying there to meet with him, and the guy says, no thanks. Meeting's off. That's like Secret Service pulls up at my house and says, President Bush would like to have a meeting with you. Sorry, I got to clip my toenails. I got something more important to do. They have snubbed President Bush. They have turned him into a paper tiger. A $400 billion neutering of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America. And while we look now with proof that Iran has been killing U.S. soldiers, what do? We do what Jimmy Carter did in 1979, where we say, yeah, we had some people held for 444 days, but, we're just going to turn and look the other way because we don't want to get involved. Colonel David Hunt is going to get involved in the program with us at the bottom of the hour, and you at 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, join me.
The Jerry Doyle Show. And now, 60 seconds of Jerry Doyle.
I submit to you again that this is about them getting reelected in 2006 and positioning themselves for 2008. Everything is being done, whether it's Guantanamo Bay, Social Security, burning the flag amendment. Why now? Why? Because they want to wrap themselves in the flag, because everyone's out there trying to position themselves and say, how do we look best supportive of the military? How do we look so supportive of our government? It's absolutely ridiculous. The country is going down the crapper because these people are just concerned about where they're going to be when they get reelected.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
Are we balancing the budget? No. Is debt out of control? Yeah. We solving Social Security? No. We're not doing any of that stuff. And the more light that gets shined on these cockroaches, the more they're screaming out, turn it off. We don't want the light of reality shining on us. Well, it is continuing to shine here on the program because this is an affront to anybody who lives in this country legally and supposedly has 535 people doing their bidding out there. Their bidding is about them getting reelected. Plain and simple.
Jerry Doyle Show.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there.
So long as the government wants us there, the graceful exit so people can get elected to the presidency in 2008, so House members and Senate members can say, you see, it's a different world now. We turned it over to the Iraqis. We had the forces in place there. We trained them. The militia stood down. And look what happened. We left, and it all went to crap. That's how I see it. How do you see it? 800-876-4123 is the number. Before we get to our guest, Colonel David Hunt, I want to talk with John in San Francisco on KNEW, who says that I'm partially responsible for us being over there. John, you're on the program.
Hey, the reason I say that is that's just not you, but all the media people out there who didn't ask any hard questions, that simplified everything as much as they could, that would tell us things that totally made no sense and would support the war and George Bush and what's going on over there, wrap themselves in terms like they're cutting runners or support the troops or simplistic things like that. You guys have a platform. This was all obvious to a lot of people a long time ago, including the French, that this is what it was all going to turn out like. And you did nothing but made fun of them. And now,
John,
1 week
John, I got to stop you, John. I wasn't on the air on talk radio when the war started. I started talk radio April of 2004, and the only thing that I have done since I have been on the air is to say, if we are going to be over there, let the military do their job. Kill people, blow stuff up, kill bad guys, take control of the region, whatever it takes to do it. That has been my mantra, John. I was not saying that we have to go to war. I was not blind to what was happening over there. But you also are blind, John, to the fact that people wanted this to be Vietnam. They wanted this to be a quagmire. The media wanted to beat this war back, and the terrorists know you don't have to study the American military. You have to study the American media. And when you take the pulse of the American people, 64% of this country that says that this war was a mistake and we should bring the soldiers home, when we only have 8% of the population involved in this war. In 1970, John, 54% of the people in this country were against the war in Vietnam when we had a draft. Today, with an all-volunteer army, we have 64% of the people in this country that say it's a bad idea. What's happening, John, is that we have lost our way because we have generals who haven't been fired. We have mid-level managers in the Pentagon that need to go. We have people that have not been allowing the military to do their jobs, and that's the reason this is happening, not because of me, John.
It was just because of you, first of all. I said it was people in the media. There's lots of responsibilities spread around. I'm sorry if I touched a nerve. But you're saying you guys. You see, because I'm a guy on talk radio, you think I'm sitting here supposedly carrying the bucket for President Bush. I'm not, John. I'm an independent conservative who's concerned about the outcome and the lives that are being lost in Iraq because we haven't let the military do their jobs. That's what I'm concerned about. What haven't they been allowed to do? For example, would you say we should put 500,000 more troops there? Should we use bigger bombs? Not everything can be done, Jerry, or not everything is worth doing.
John, let me ask you. In the beginning, we were told not to blow up mosques, right? Because it was the most sacred part of the country, right? We were told not to blow up mosques. Am I correct?
No, you're not correct.
We were told not to blow. Don't tell me, John. John, we were told don't blow up mosques because it's sacred property, even though we knew they were bringing caskets into the mosque loaded with weapons and they were using women and children as shields out in front of the mosque. When did all of this insurgency start to get crazy? It's when they blew up the most sacred mosque in Baghdad and people started going nuts. That's when it all happened. The people who are now doing the stuff that we didn't do in the beginning. If we had gone in with shock and awe, if we had to drop more 500-pounders, if we had to put more people at room temperature, if we had to kill those 190 terrorists that were assembled outside that cemetery, and we didn't pull the trigger back in July because we didn't want to upset people in Afghanistan because there might have been innocent women or children. I guarantee you, John, a lot of soldiers have died or been wounded since those very same people have had another day to kill soldiers. The problem with you, John, is that you're trying to blame this on talk radio, that people are out there propping up President Bush. That's not the case. I'm here to prop up the U.S. military, not George Bush, not Republicans, not Democrats. And, John, if we're not going to do the job, then you tell me why we have one American soldier left for one more day in that region.
I will think we should be there. I was a fun.
So we're talking about the same thing, John. I'm saying if we're not going to do the job and let the soldiers do what they do best, then let's get the hell out of there. What's the point? This is all about politics. Democrats equally as irresponsible as Republicans in not letting the military unleash their weapons of their own mass destruction. Thanks for the call, John. 800-876-4123. Joining us on the program, a verbal weapon of mass destruction, Colonel David Hunt, Fox News military analyst and author of the New York Times bestseller, They Just Don't Get It. Colonel Hunt, welcome to the program.
Hi, poor John. Give him some blood.
Give
John some
Colonel,
blood.
5 weeks ago, you and I were saying, after the conversation about Bush making concessions about the 1968 Tet Offensive and him saying, well, he might be right. Back then, you and I on this program said the fix is in. This is peace with honor. Has it not come to that place?
Yeah, it's in a very bad, ugly place. It's in the toilet. Kissinger has said it's not working. You've got Gingrich said it's a failure. More importantly, we've still got soldiers and Iraqi civilians dying. And all they can do is argue whether it's civil war or chaos. How about it's a chaotic civil war? We have absolutely screwed this up. There seems that this administration and this set of military leaders are incapable at this time, it seems, to get it right. So now it's going to be done on the back of some commission led by Baker, and this guy Hamilton is going to give them some cover to do some kind of phased withdrawal. And Iraq is going to be left, and it can't do this, worse than when we got there. It's either 60,000 Iraqis have been killed, 150,000 Iraqi civilians have been killed, or 600,000, depending on which study and which government you want to believe, Jerry. But nobody's going to argue with this number. 25,000 American servicemen killed or wounded, and for what? So these guys can argue about chaos or civil war, or have political cover, or do peace with honor, or because, as you've already said, so somebody can get elected. The soldiers didn't get their arms blown off, their eyes popped out, and their skulls crushed, and their lives ruined forever to have somebody get elected. That's not why guys do their jobs. And to not support them now, to not let them do their jobs, to not let sniping go on, to not have shot looters. You know, this war has gone on at the beginning. This war has gone on longer now, Jerry, since World War II. That's over 1,700 days. And all we can come at the end is argue about whether it's a chaos or civil war. I'm totally disgusted with these people. They've been absolutely wrong. The soldiers I go visit, and I'm going to go back over to Iraq and see them. They deserve much better than they've gotten, and they've gotten bad leadership, both political and military. We ought to be disgusted with a lot of them.
You know, this one story here reading today about the Iraq panel set to urge major withdrawal. So they're saying, well, we're not saying bring the troops home immediately, but the troops are coming home, Colonel Hunt. It's just a matter of time. And if it's just a matter of time and we're going to make it look like we've given the Iraqis the capabilities to stand up for themselves, and we know that's a lie. We know it's a lie because we've known for 2 years that we didn't send the right people to go over there and train them. They didn't have the equipment, and for 2 years, they knew that this was important for them to stand up so we could stand down. And now they're saying all of a sudden, well, hey, look, they're ready to go. They're not ready to go. It's another lie.
There is not a single, we've trained over 350,000 Iraqi soldiers. There's not a single 500-man unit that's capable of operating in Iraq by itself, Iraqi units. We've done the training, but the Iraqi military can't talk to each other, they can't drive each other, they can't feed each other, they can't supply themselves with bullets. We got 4% of the guns that we've given the Iraqis are missing, besides the billions of dollars in aid. This is a failed application of force. Our guys gave them this great victory. Well, 150 guys were killed when somebody put a flag sign up and said mission accomplished. And then longer than World War II, we got this number of soldiers dead and wounded. Absolutely wrong the way this has been done. And Abizaid needs to go down the road. We got 4-star generals right now, like Conway, who's a Marine general, who says the Marine Corps, although it's barely doing its job, we're not training for the other kind of wars we're going to have to be in. I need more Marines. And yet we got a guy named Abizaid who's running the war, who's denying that that Iran is involved with killing American soldiers. We got serious problems with leadership in this country, both military and civilian, and it's for me all about the guys dying. They deserve better, and they haven't been getting it. And I'm not sure with this new election we're going to see anything, maybe some accountability. But it sounds like the President of the United States is once again going with stay the course. Whatever Baker and Hamilton are going to say, stay the course means more guys are dying, and Iraq falls further into this chaos civil war thing we've been watching. It's absolutely disgraceful. We ought to be embarrassed for our country. This is wrong. We know better than this. We are better than this. People should be outraged, and I don't hear it.
I don't hear it either, Colonel Hunt. Another thing that's going to outrage people down the road when they come to find out that we have now ill-equipped our military to be able to fight any future type of conflict in a, quote, conventional war format.
There's what happened to the tanks and Bradleys and vehicles and soldiers' gear in Iraq and Afghanistan is a $30 billion price tag to make it better. That's $30 billion worth of stuff we're going to have to give to be able to fight wherever else we have to go. And as I mentioned, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, that's a 4-star general who's a senior Marine of the 200,000 plus Marines, has said publicly, his Marine Corps is in trouble. His Marine Corps needs help. His Marine Corps is not training for other type of missions. It's only doing Iraq. They're doing 7 months, Jerry, in Iraq, coming home for 7 months and going back. That's unheard of. We didn't do that in World War II. We didn't do that in Korea. We didn't do it in Vietnam. 7-month rotations is unbelievable. It'd hard on the Marine. The Marines are the only ones doing this right now. The Army's doing like 17-month rotations because they got more guys. So we're doing 7 months. You know the kind of pressure that puts on a family, on his debts, on his kids, on him, and the units. By the way, the units. How do you train together 7 months and then disappear again, and then come back? That's in a place called the El Anbar province that's been fighting. The Marines have been fighting out there. We've lost over 1,500 guys, and it's still not won yet. The El Anbar province in Ramadi area in the west. Everyone talks about Baghdad. This is a mess. When the Commandant of the Marine Corps gets out and says, my Marines are going to be in trouble, we're barely doing our mission, we need more, people got to start paying attention.
And in paying attention to what's happening out there, the latest news today is that the U.S. officials found definitive evidence that the Iranians are supporting terrorists in Iraq. And we've got the IEDs. They're providing the most advanced IEDs, which pierce armor and anti-tank weapons. The weapons have been supplied to the growing Shia militia, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard, and the government says, we have evidence of that, but yet Abizaid on 60 Minutes says, no, we have to make the distinction here that it's not the Iran government, but yet they're quoted as saying today that there's no way that this could have been done without Iranian government approval. Who tells Abizaid what to say on 60 Minutes to say, no, there's no connection? And before you answer that, Colonel Hunt, here's what I'm thinking, is that somebody got to this guy and said, look, we've got peace with honor. We've got an exit strategy. We've got this graceful exit that we want to have happen. We need the Iranians to get involved to tell the militias in Iraq to stand down. How is it that this guy, a 4-star, would sit there and say, no, we're not really at war with the Iranian people, even though Iranian weapons going into Iraq are killing U.S. soldiers?
Abizaid, the answer directly is being told what to say by Secretary of Defense. Everything Abizaid says on television, everything Abizaid says publicly, is cleared in advance. He has no original thoughts, and everyone has been in the military and understands this. No officer gets on television and goes in front of Congress or has a public thought that hasn't been briefed, listened to by somebody. And in Abizaid's case, the Secretary of Defense and the White House. And the fact that he may say, it's okay to say we're not at war with the Iranian people, but the Iranian government has been killing soldiers in Iraq for over 1,700 days since we've been there. They've given that this explosive device is a charge, a copper plate they've increased the power so it does penetrate our tanks, which is the best armor in the world, and our Humvees. And it's been going like that for 2.5 years. We've got Iran. We got their money. We got their equipment. We got their people. The Iranian government is absolutely behind this because the Iranian intelligence service is absolutely behind this. And to deny it, and the reason we're denying it, Jerry, is all politics again. We can't go to war with Iran on the ground. We can bomb them. And because of this atomic bomb business, and because the Shia government in Iraq is also kissing the Iraq. Right now, President Bush is meeting with the Prime Minister of Iraq. The same day, the President of Iraq is meeting with the President of Iran. So Abizaid's told what to say, and he said it. It's embarrassing. Abizaid needs to go, along with Rumsfeld and along with General Casey. They didn't get it done. It didn't go well. You're not winning this war. General, come here. We need a General Grant or a General Marshall. We need leadership. We need a Lincoln. We need great Americans to step up and make this happen. And Grant is an example. Nasty, drunk, and didn't care. Just got it done. And we don't have generals like that. We got guys who will sit in front of a camera and lie. I mean, that's a flat lie to suggest that an Iranian government, they've been killing our guys. And in the intelligence community, and Abizaid has his own national intelligence support team. CIA, NSA, and DIA are assigned to his staff. He is briefed every day at the highest levels, and they are telling him that this is Iran, this is Syria, this is Chechenian fighters, this is where the money's coming from. He knows, but he's been told by his bosses and his handlers not to say it, and he didn't. He should be ashamed of himself. Go retire, General, be a consultant, get out of the way.
Colonel, I got about 20 seconds. Quick answer. Any reason that you can think of that the U.S. troops should be kept in the region for another day?
No. They've made a mess of this. No, not one more soldier should die or be blown up for a failed policy of politicians that won't back them up. You're not going to back our guys up, which they won't, get them out. Our soldiers don't get paid enough. They deserve better than they're getting. The answer is no. And this is how you're going to fight them? This is how you're going to back them up? No, not one more guy should die for an Iraqi country, for Iraqi civilization who won't even fight for themselves, and our politicians who won't back them up. No, bring them out.
Colonel David Hunt, thanks for joining us on the program. This is very frustrating. Colonel David Hunt, get his book. They just don't get it. He's got a new book coming out on the hunt, and it's even more, unfortunately, hard-hitting and insightful into just how absolutely insane these policies have been. Colonel David Hunt, always a pleasure to talk with you on the program. 800-876-4123 is the number. You've heard me. You've heard the Colonel. Let's hear from you. Is there any reason that we should have one more soldier killed or blown up or have to spend time in Walter Reed or away from their families if this government is not going to allow them to do their jobs? 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, join me.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there. So long as the government wants us there. So long as the government wants us there. So long as the government wants us there.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
I'm going to make you this promise. I'm not going to allow the sacrifice of 2,527 troops who died in Iraq to be in vain by pulling out before the job is done.
The Jerry Doyle Show. It's the Jerry Doyle Show. And now, 30 seconds of Jerry Doyle.
We don't have cameras in a lot of courtroom cases. We sequester juries. How come we don't sequester Congress and say, until you set out a budget, then you can't leave? Oh, man, am I sick and tired. Absolutely ridiculous. 1947, televised congressional proceedings when congressmen who should have been there part-time for free became rock stars. Washington, Hollywood for ugly people. Short segment here. We'll hold the calls over to the next hour. We'll continue on this vein. Got a minute? Let's squeeze one in. Marvin, San Francisco, KNEW line 2. Couldn't disagree with me more. Marvin, you're on the program.
Thank you, Jerry. Clemenceau once described war as a series of catastrophes followed by victory. And what everybody's doing now, including you and Colonel Hunt, and I've appreciated your view all along for the last, couple of years. But the bottom line is that you're looking at the catastrophes and calling it a disaster and a mess and blah, 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 blah. All that says is you don't realize 1 month before the end of World War II, we lost 7,000 men at Iwo Jima. That was a disaster. Bad planning, mistakes were made, lots of men died, more than have died in all of these wars, including 9/11. And here are people today who don't understand what war is all about and the kind of war that we're in which people are going out and committing atrocities against their own race in Baghdad and everywhere else. We're up against something that's beyond anything that we faced in World War II.
I agree with you there, Marvin. But if the difference is in World War II, we killed bad guys, we blew stuff up. That's the difference. We're not doing that now. We let soldiers fight. We had generals who were accountable. We understood body counts. But today, it's much different. We don't even understand who the enemy is. The problem is that we're not willing to fight them because why? Politicians want to position themselves. This is peace with honor. Marvin, put on hold. Put Marvin on hold. 800-876-4123 is the number. We'll carry this over to the next hour. Jerry Doyle, join me.
The Jerry Doyle Show. Visit us online at talkradionetwork.com.
Forget about Republicans, Democrats, independents, and all this.
Don't you get it, Jerry?
No.
I do get it.
No.
Good morning. Civil war, a bloody weekend of sectarian clashes in Iraq.
Terror, horror, death. Film at 11.
Jerry Doyle grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Has a 10-year career on Wall Street. A long list of movie and TV roles, including the character Michael Garibaldi for 110 episodes on the Emmy Award-winning sci-fi series Babylon 5. He's an honorary naval aviator and F-16 test pilot. Impressive. And ran as a Republican for the U.S. House of Representatives in California.
King. Well, I didn't vote for you.
You want to talk politics, pop culture, and current events?
What's your language, you bud? We're on the air.
Let's do it on the Jerry Doyle Show.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there.
So long as the government wants us there. That's the latest clip from President Bush. And what I say is one of the defining statements about the fix being in, that the war is over. It has been decided. All parties coming together to help form some political future for Democrats, Republicans, Israel, Palestine, Iran, Syria, the list goes on. Is the fix in? I think it is. And I think it's been in for 5 weeks since the peace with honor discussion took place. JD here. Join me, 800-876-4123. Charles and Jesse work in the booth. Dyslexic Doug's got your calls at 800-876-4123. Emails at the website, jerrydoyle.com. The program where intellectual anarchy is encouraged and nurtured. In past programs, I've been talking to you about what the real plan is. Not our plan, the enemy's plan. And they have a 6-stage plan. They're not waiting for certification. They're not waiting for validation. They have a plan. The enemy has a plan to take us over. In the second stage of their plan to try and take over the globe, the Islamo-fascist, the second stage is called eye-opening. And it says here that it will last until the end of 2006. Iraq will become the recruiting ground for young men eager to attack America. In this phase, Al-Qaeda will move from being an organization to a mushrooming, invincible, and popular trend. Muslims will be pressed to donate funds to make up for the seizure of terrorist assets by the West. The third stage, which they call arising and standing up, starts in 2007, and that stage says Al-Qaeda's focus will then be on Syria and Turkey, but it will also begin to directly confront Israel in order to gain more credibility among the Muslim population. We have been talking about this for many, many months. Their plan is in place. I believe the plan to have peace with honor, to have an exit strategy, to have a graceful exit, and to have politicians be able to position themselves so that somehow people forget that there was a failure, and there has been a cataclysmic failure in Iraq. I don't know if anybody can debate that there has been a failure there. But why has there been a failure? Is it because of the soldiers? No. Is it because of the soldiers' families? Absolutely not. Is it because of technology? Absolutely not. Is it because of the politicians? Partially. How much of it is the responsibility of the American people? 64% of the people in this country say we shouldn't be there. It was a huge mistake. Is it Ted Kennedy's problem because he wanted to make this Vietnam in a quagmire? Is it because we've lost 2,875 troops so far with 20,000 plus wounded in the ongoing conflict? Who do you blame? Who do you blame? 800-876-4123 is the number. Last hour I was talking with Marvin from San Francisco, who said he couldn't disagree with me more and Colonel David Hunt on the program talking about, and we were trying to just say, look, as far as we can see, what's the point in keeping troops there for one more day if it has already been decided that this is going to end. Marvin, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I'll just ask this question. Let's say that you had determined, and we won't know the real answers to these things. You can speculate all you want, but let's assume that the administration came to the conclusion and had good intelligence to decide that the Iran experiment with nuclear weapons was going to go forward. You tell me where you would rather attack them from. Bringing all the troops home here and everybody celebrating whatever they want to call it, or would you rather have an advanced contingent of all kinds of military right over the Iranian border? I mean, you can't judge a war as you're going through it because it is a series of catastrophes that lead to victory. And that's why people in wartime, from Ulysses S. Grant to Sherman and so forth, we are in a position where we probably have to do things that there is no political will to do. Round up a whole bunch of people, deport them, all that kind of stuff that a lot of people come up with from time to time. But the politics always has involved itself in these kinds of things. And it did in World War II, but the difference was that we didn't have a media that was so hostile, and we didn't have people like Colonel Hunt, who really are just trying to get rid of the guys that are probably ahead of his friends in the military and the Pentagon.
That's an unfair statement. That's an unfair statement about him, Marvin. I've talked at great length with Colonel Hunt. This is not about him trying to help his buddies move forward. This isn't about him trying to, get positioned so that he gets some kind of advisory role, although I do think he should have one. That's an unfair statement about him. His concern, and I've talked to him about this at great length, his meeting.
Then Iwo Jima, 16,000 people died. I mean, it is a series of these kinds of things, and the question is, can you take it, and can you continue to push forward in the teeth of difficult situations like we're in, which is far more difficult because it was less insidious against Japan and Germany than it is here. One last thing.
Marvin, I just want to talk to you about information that comes out over time. To me, is very revealing about what we knew and when we knew it. That's always been the mantra: who knew what when, and who covered up what information. So when you have Abizaid on 60 Minutes talking about the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and being very specific to say that we are not at war with the Iranian people, that we are not at war with the country of Iran. And I'll play the audio. Listen to Abizaid on 60 Minutes, how cautious he is to say that we are not at war with Iran.
At the same time that the government of Iran is talking about stabilizing Iraq, these Revolutionary Guard Quds Force people are supporting the Shia death squads of some of the various splinter militias.
So aren't we already at a war with Iran and through its proxies in Iraq?
No, we're not at war with Iran through its proxies. We are in a period of making it clear to the Iranians that they need to move to help stabilize Iraq and not destabilize it.
So a few days later, Marvin, this comes out, that all of a sudden U.S. officials say they found evidence that the Iranians are supporting terrorists in Iraq, brand new weapons fresh from Iranian factories, and they say munitions bear manufacturing dates in 2006, and according to the U.S. official, quote, there is no way this could be done without Iranian government approval. So all of a sudden, after that statement by Abizaid, then today they come out with this information that, well, actually, we found the information today. To me, this is too convenient, Marvin.
They have found pictures. They've published pictures of things with Chinese letters on them that are weaponry that have been given to them recently. Same thing with the Soviets. I mean, all that kind of stuff is. I think Abizaid probably was repeating the party line, but the bottom line is we've known about this forever. Consider this, Jerry. Not once did the president go to Congress and declare war after 9/11. That is what was needed. We've always known that Iran was involved with Hezbollah, with all these other groups. It's a network. It's just like the Soviets were funding all kinds of terrorism in the 60s and 70s. We know this. The question is, what do you do about it? And at times, that's a very nuanced problem. You don't just launch missiles at another country. We should probably do a Michael Corleone on 3 countries, but you can't. You can't.
I know, but now, Marvin, here's where we're at. Now we have Republicans saying we should negotiate directly with Iran and Syria, and the Republicans 6 months ago, when Democrats were saying the very same thing, called them traitors, cowards, appeasers, and cut-and-runners.
Well, you're saying kind of the same thing, that we should pull out. We should do. I mean, things can be interpreted that way. The bottom line is that wars are messy and they take forever, and everybody wants them to end. But how do you get the spirit of the people to back it and going through the whole experience that's necessary to actually end it? That's what Patton said. The reason we have more wars is the politicians don't let us end the one that we just had.
I agree. So who ultimately does this fall on? The American people, 64% of the people that just say, bad war, should not be there, when only 8% of the country is actively involved in an all-volunteer army and their families? Who do you blame? Do you blame the American people?
People are not being educated and haven't been all along about what war is and how it works and what it's like being in one. And I say that the biggest mistake Bush made was not going to Congress and declaring war on Wahhabist Islam. And I agree, he should have just taken him out at Fallujah and done these things. But the political context in which all this stuff was done is now driving the debate. That is our problem. And when Republicans are using this thing and making political comments like that, and people like Hunt, everybody gets the idea that everybody's on the same page, just like your Green Party guy made about 15, 20 minutes ago saying that. Now you got the liberals calling up saying, oh, yeah, you see, we were right all along. They aren't. This is war, and the problem is people aren't educated to understand what that means, and it wasn't communicated from the very beginning. That was a mistake. I think that you're always going to be able to nitpick a war. I mean, and that's what's going on now. That's my opinion.
I understand, Marvin, but then you got Dan Bartlett, spokesman for President Bush, comes out with regard to being snubbed by Maliki and says, well, the initial gathering had been foreseen as, quote, more of a social meeting anyway. I mean, come on. I mean, he was snubbed. President Bush was snubbed. And I understand meetings get canceled, and it's happened in previous wars. I get all that. But just let's call it what it is. And what we're not doing is we're calling it a war. When you look at the fact that in the 20th century, 180 million people died in conflicts worldwide. When you look at the number of casualties in World War II, and I don't like to compare body counts between this war and Vietnam, the difference is that the people out there don't understand that there's a war going on, but the politicians understand that there's a certain vibe in America today. They're more, in my opinion, Marvin, the politicians, and a lot of them that were about winning this war, the John McCains and others that have been not listened to by the Republicans, and there are some strong Democrats like Joe Lieberman, former Democrat, now independent, that understood that you have to do the things necessary to win the war. But unfortunately, we don't have those politicians in a position of influence anymore. The media influencing the outcome of the war and showing us the body count, the sad commentary, as John Kerry says, a tragic day when we've passed 1,500 soldiers that have lost their lives. People understand wars are messy. I get it, Marvin. What I don't get now is when I look at all the information that lines up for me that the fix is in, that we're getting out of there. We're going to leave. It's just a question of time. And if we're going to get out, what's the point of staying there any longer? I'm with you, Marvin. If we are going to fight a war, then fight a war. More troops, more money, more equipment. Blow more stuff up. Kill more bad guys. Send a message. Terrorize the terrorists. We need more dead Zarqawis with the 500-pounders, taking them to room temperature. I agree, and we can do it. There's not a military on this planet that can beat us in a stand-up war, which was said by Dick Cheney. He was right. There's nobody out there that can beat us. But if the fix is in, Marvin, if it has been decided politically that we are all going to walk away at some point, then what is the point of staying there another day so we can prop up a fake Iraqi security force, a fake Iraqi army? Then you have Syria telling their side, Iran telling their side, the Shia and the Sunnis telling each of their own factions, and then you have the al-Sadrs of the world saying, stand down, stand down, stand down. And then the violence decreases. It looks like the Iraqi security forces are doing their job. We get the wink and the nod from Maliki, it's time to leave. We leave, then they go back to what they're doing, and politicians here can say, well, when we left, everything was good, and it all went kerflooey after that. My point, Marvin, I understand war. You understand war. Most people understand war, that it is messy. But if we're not going to fight it, what's the point of fighting the inevitable where it's peace with honor? That's the problem I have with this, Marvin. That's why I say if we're not going to fight and win, if we're not going to take the recommendations to send another 15,000 to 20,000 troops, if we're not going to commit the extra billions of dollars that we need, then what's the point? What's the point of losing another soldier's life? I appreciate the call, Marvin. Good comments. 800-876-4123 is the number. This out of the Associated Press today. The report that's coming out, the Iraq Study Group. It says would allow the U.S. government to put al-Maliki's fragile governing coalition on notice that it must settle its own differences. That makes sense, right? Tamp down sectarian violence. That makes sense. and prepare to assume growing responsibility for the country's security. All makes sense, right? Next sentence. It could also give the Bush administration political cover to step back from red lines it has set up in Iraq. Go to the second page of this. The Bush administration is conducting its own crisis evaluation. So is General Peter Pace, Joint Chiefs. He said, which could, what? Provide a different kind of political cover. People are looking for political cover. Newt Gingrich, giving a speech in New Hampshire, calls the war in Iraq a failure. He calls the war in Iraq a failure after the election. Was it all of a sudden a failure? Was it a failure on November 6th? Was it a failure on November 7th? Or was it better politically for him to say it's a failure and for him to say that unless the administration admits that it's a failure, then you can't bring about the third stage? And why would he want to say something like that? Because Gingrich served on a key Pentagon board that advised who? Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld in the run-up to the war, eager to distance himself from the Bush administration's handling of the war. 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, join me.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
Think for yourself. Question authority.
Speak your mind now on The Jerry Doyle Show.
General Patton commenting on the politicians pulling up short, and then we come back and fight an egg. Let me ask you this question, and to Daryl and John, Liz, Cliff, Tom, everybody else that's on hold. I'll take your calls after the bottom of the hour. But when you look at this situation, it's going to look like there's peace in the Middle East. Or am I completely mistaken on this one? When you have Olmert making concessions to the Palestinians, we will give you land, we will release assets, we will release prisoners. Where did that come from? Was there not just a war that took place there? Very recently, in the news, 24 hours a day, discussions about overreaction, underreaction, U.S. wink and nod, not telling them to stand down. But now that's happening. And then we have Ahmadinejad being lauded by Christiane Amanpour on CNN as if he's the great peacemaker, the letter that he sends off to the U.S. public. Ahmadinejad is now looking like the sane one. Bush is looking like the irrational one. But where's the irrationality coming from? I said about, I guess it was 5 weeks ago, that when Bush finally capitulated on that comment from the reporter about, is this the Tet Offensive all over again, he said it might be. I said I was surprised Bush lasted as long as he did. Because who was falling by the wayside? Tony Blair. We saw other nations pulling troops out. He was the last man standing. The problem I have with all of this is who's the last man standing in Iraq, or the last woman that might be the last casualty. If this is going to come to fruition that we are getting out, then what's the point of staying? And do you not think that somewhere down the road, this is all going to happen again? 800-876-4123 is the number. Jerry Doyle, join me.
Stand up and be heard now on The Jerry Doyle Show.
All right, let's hear what you have to say. Give us a call, 800-876-4123. Las Vegas, Nevada. Daryl, KDWN, line 10. Thanks for holding. Daryl, you're on the program.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Doyle. I may not know a lot about war. I only spent from 67 to 70 in Vietnam, but I'm seeing a lot of deja vu here, and I have to agree with you and Colonel Hunt, who, by the way, I disagree with the other caller. You can tell when an officer cares about his men, and obviously Colonel Hunt does. I don't think that there's any other motivation behind it. But I'm seeing a lot of deja vu of the war being run by a Ouija board or something like that. And, you made the point, who wants to be the last casualty of Iraq?
And I just, that's the thing. If I'm right, and I'm not saying that I am, but it just looks to me more and more like this fix is in, whether it's responding to the lack of will of the American people, whether it's responding to the international pressures of seeing other nations drop out of their support. Now we've got Britain saying we're out in 07, Poland out in 07, Italy out in 07. People are starting to put these things in place, and it just looks to me like at some point, whatever confluence of events comes together, that this is going to happen. Now, some people have said we're going to have troops there for 3 to 5 years until we have people trained. Some people say that we're going to be pulling troops back into Kuwait. I mean, there's a lot of speculation, but all things to me lead to the point, Darrell, where we're getting out of there. And if this has already been decided, then let's try and decide that we don't lose any more people if it's at all possible. That's the thing that's bugging me about this. And your point about Colonel Hunt, Colonel Hunt does, and I just don't talk on the radio. Colonel Hunt and I talk all the time, almost every day, 2-3 times a day, saying, did you see this? Did you see this? What about this? Yeah, what about that? And he's going, Jerry, I can't believe this is happening. And his concerns are the same as mine. Why haven't people been fired? Why haven't people been held accountable? How is it that we can have this much mismanagement and this much nonsense taking place, but nobody's being held accountable? With regard to the Hadley memo being released, why aren't they saying we're going to, like a pit bull, we're going to find out who released that memo? And Bush, is he covering for Maliki? Is Maliki covering for Bush? They have to cancel a meeting because the memo gets leaked. Bush has to respond. You got the commander-in-chief flying over in Air Force One to meet with a guy who's trying to help his nation, and then they have to cancel the meeting. Why? Because of pressures from al-Sada? No, the pressure didn't come from al-Sada. The pressure came from whoever leaked the memo. They should find who leaked the memo in a time of war, find out if he actually did it, and put him in front of a wall and shoot him. That's what they should do, but Bush is taking the heat for it. And the problem that I have, Darrell, is if the fix is in, then I don't want to have to read about who the last soldier to die in Iraq was. That's the point I'm trying to make. Thank you very much, Darrell. 800-876-4123. Let's go to Fairfax, Virginia. Liz, WTNT. Liz, you're on the program.
Hey, Jerry, you're going to make me pick up smoking again.
Sorry.
And if you guys decide to do that, quit smoking week, I'll be right there with you because I'm a failed non-smoker. Anyway, I agree with you that the fix might be in, but not for the same reason.
All right.
Bush's remark, that we'll stay there as long as the government wants us to be there. I interpreted that as helping him helping him give Maliki, saving face kind of thing with al-Sadr, and I know that's stupid, but he seems to feel he needs to do that, and trying to show that, or trying to state to the residents there that America is not an occupier but a helper. And remember, Maliki did boycott the first day of the summit, but not the second day, so there was kind of a compromise there. He was not there clipping his toenails and doing something else. I mean, I think he was trying to go straight down the middle. What I am concerned about, and what's really worrying me, and what makes me think the fix might in fact be in, as opposed to Bush's statement, what's worrying me is this Baker-Hamilton report that we're to expect in a few days. I have worked in Washington politics for 16 years, and I have never known any other reason for a bipartisan blue ribbon commission to exist other than CYA. None. I mean, the BRAC commission is a perfect example. If they come out, all these leaks are coming out about what the report's going to say. If they say, well, we should get out within such and such time, whatever. I'm just terrified that instead of really taking it to our enemy, which I know you agree with, and I wholeheartedly do, believe me, I think that bipartisan blue ribbon commission is going to come up with some, lame recommendations that will give us the, as Bush said, graceful exit, and then we're going to go, and we won't have done the job. And furthermore, I would like to know, when did we delegate the authority to make these decisions to non-elected bipartisan commissions? I thought we elected senators, representatives, and presidents to make tough decisions and not to hand them off to bipartisan non-elected commissions.
Let me ask you this, Liz. How many of these elected officials that were strong on the war lost their midterm elections and their senatorial seats because they were strong on the war? I mean, do you think George Allen in Virginia lost because of Macaca, or did he lose because of his resolute support of the war?
He lost because of Macaca. I know. I worked for him.
Really? You think he lost because of Macaca?
I know he worked. He lost because of Macaca. Yep.
Oh,
I just if it doesn't fit with your mindset, but yes, that's why.
No, I'm just. Was it a stupid thing to say? Yeah. Was the denial stupid to say? Well, I meant to say Mohawk. Yeah. I mean, his people should have said no. You said it. Apologize. Make amends. Move forward.
Well,
I think the
Washington Post ran it on the front page. I think it was 14 days in a row.
Yeah, I mean, the media made it much bigger than it was. But, you look at people that have been strong on the war and in the Republican side that got hammered for this. I think that's where the American people have let the politicians down who were supporting the war effort. And when you look at the fact that this is the thing that I have trouble with, Liz, is that there are people out there that think that we can lose the war. But you think on a head-to-head conflict, we can't lose the war. We've got the best trained army. We've got the best technology, the best equipment available. Granted, it has not been there when needed in the places that it should have been. But if we decided to terrorize the terrorist and shrink the playground where the terrorists are trying to bully everybody on the playground, if we went in there and actually unleashed the military, we would scare the hell out of these people. If we went in and started dropping some serious ordnance in the beginning, and the problem was, Liz, and I know this is going to sound callous, but there weren't enough dead soldiers in the beginning. We were so cautious as to minimize loss of U.S. soldiers' lives that in essence what we've done is we've cost more soldiers' lives by not doing what we should have done right out of the box, is to go in there, and after we had the quick road to Baghdad, we should have said, wait a minute, there's a terrorist over here doing what? Boom, bombs, kill him. Terrorist over here, boom, bombs, kill him. And the more people we would have killed up front of the bad guys, the less we would have seen of our troops die. And when I look at this nonsense about how people think we can lose to people who play polo with a goat's head and live in a cave, to me, that's the problem that I've had in the beginning in how this war has been run. But now, where we're at in the aftermath of what we're seeing now in this graceful exit that Bush says is not graceful, there is no honor with peace. There's peace with honor, and that honor comes from killing the bad guy and winning the war. And that's the problem I'm having. But if we're at the place, Liz, where it's already been decided that it's just a matter of time, then what's the point of losing another soldier's life? Thanks for the call, Liz. 800-876-4123 is the number. Let's go to San Francisco, California. KNEW. John, line 9, veteran. Welcome to the program.
I have a couple of comments on Colonel Hunt there. You have to trust colonels. You can't trust generals because generals get their first stars and so on politically. And so unless you stomp on the 8 years of misuse of powers in the Clinton administration, you're never going to have a military that goes out and fights there. I'm a disabled vet, and I have a little experience in that area, so just take it at that, Jerry.
So let me ask you this, John. When we have these... And Colonel Hunt, when he talks about it, he says, we need the field guys. We need the staff sergeants. We need the majors. We need the colonels. We need the people that are actually there fighting the fight. And the people, he says, that are running the war are what he calls PowerPoint Rangers. People that sit there and put this great glossy up and look at this screen, and I can point to this and say, this is one thing. What do you think here? Take a look at this. And he goes, no, you have to go to the guys in the field that are fighting and say, what do we need to do to win? And when you have these generals making these decisions and no decision made to fire any of them, and you can't say that there hasn't been an instance where one of these guys should not have been fired, I don't understand why that continues.
Well, that's just a fact of life in the military. Once you get that first star, you're politically connected, and from then on, you can do no wrong as long as you play by the political rules there, Jerry.
Well, let me ask you this, John. When all those generals started coming out with their books and saying that, the war's a failure, it's Vietnam, it's a quagmire, those guys shouldn't have come out. And if they're true to the military code, they shouldn't have been coming out and second-guessing during the time of war, should they?
No, and the reason is because they were political appointees to get up to the rank of general. You got to trust your colonels and your gunny sergeants and all the rest of it there, or you're not going to win anything. And I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate the phone call, John. 800-876-4123 is the number. In Virginia, WTNT, Ann, line 2. Thanks for holding. Ann, you're on the program.
Hi, Jerry. I just want to thank you for finally leading the talk about the failure of generalship in Iraq. That really is where the blame lies in this whole conflict, and it's such a shame that President Bush doesn't seem to have the knowledge or wherewithal to start relieving and firing some of these generals. They have absolutely failed the military. They've gotten a lot of guys killed because they refuse to bring the hammer down. They don't have the moral will, the moral courage to do the ugly business of killing. And killing is what has to happen. And most of these guys in command right now have never commanded in combat, so they really don't have that personal experience at a junior level of what it's like. And it's just been devastating for the military and for our country because The politicians won't get rid of them. The president won't fire some of these guys, and but they're the ones who are putting like the rules of engagement. If there's a mosque that people are shooting from, you can't fire back at the mosque. I mean, that's nuts. In World War II, if they shot from a church, our generals leveled the church. I mean, no question. You have to have the will and greater than your enemy to win, and we have to bring the hammer down. And when you think about, we defeated the war machine in Nazi Germany, we defeated Imperial Japan. Defeat these guys? Give me a break. We haven't even unleashed 1/10 of the power of the U.S. military against them, and it's just people are beside themselves in the military.
I know. It's frustrating because, I mean, I'm here in Las Vegas, and every morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm outside, and I'm watching the 15s and the 16s and the 22s crackle out of Nellis Air Force Base. I'm watching red flag exercises. I'm seeing what we have. I've been to so many bases, and I've been on the USS Constellation, CV-64, when they're doing carrier quals, and I look at what we have in technology, and I look in the eyes of these soldiers, and they have a we can't lose mentality. Unfortunately, and I think part of the problem with President Bush is his loyalty, is his weakness. He believes that he's getting the best information, but I believe that there are people that are undermining him for their own purposes. Why would they leak the Hadley memo right before he's heading over to meet with Maliki? Why would they want to do that to him? Because there's some little subsect of the government that wants the status quo to remain for their own political and for their own job futures. Bush, unfortunately, is a loyal guy, and that has been his downfall here. People should have been fired along the way, because just as you have to terrorize the terrorist, you have to terrorize the generals. You have to terrorize the hierarchy. You have to look at those people that you're the commander-in-chief of and say, you did that? That was your decision? You're fired. Next. And when you start to demand that of your own rank, then you'll start to get it from the rank and file. Then that will transfer itself over to the enemy, who's going to look up one day and say, man, these guys aren't fooling around. But unfortunately, these people that can't beat us militarily think they can. And it gets back to this, Ann, the fact that the terrorists study our media. They don't study our military. They know CNN is going to run the sniper audio and the video. They know. They can count on it. Why did they go to CNN? Why didn't they go to Fox? Why didn't they go to ABC? Because they knew CNN would run it. And if CNN would run it, then it's going to help to undermine the military. This isn't Bush's fault. Bush is at the apex of all of this. He's the guy that everybody points to and derides, and I'm guilty of it too, and I hate to do it sometimes, but he's the guy that has to make decisions, and he hasn't made the decision to fire people who have made the wrong decision, who have gotten our soldiers killed. Thanks, Ann. I appreciate the call. 800-876-4123 is the number. Speaking of CNN, Christiana Amanpour doing a hit with John Roberts on Anderson Cooper 360, and it was a love fest of Ahmadinejad. It was a love fest in response to the letter that Ahmadinejad sent to the American people saying, God-fearing, peace-loving, and justice-seeking American people in America, in an open letter, said the United States should leave Iraq and spend billions of dollars meant for war on the welfare of Americans instead. He wrote that the Iranian and the American people share common values to protect freedom and human dignity, and said that hundreds of thousands of my Iranian compatriots are living among you in friendship and peace. He also urged support for the creation of a Palestinian homeland, portraying U.S. backing for Israel as the key difference that alienates the United States from much of the Middle East. Amanpour out of her way to say, do you see who the reasonable guy is right now? It's Ahmadinejad, the guy who called for the destruction of Israel, that denies the actual existence of the Holocaust. I'm going to play some of the audio when you get back. It has gotten completely ass backwards. 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, join me.
The Jerry Doyle Show. Show.
So we've got information that Iran has been providing weapons, killing U.S. soldiers. We've got information now that the most powerful militia in Iraq, Mohammed al-Sadr's Mahdi army, is receiving training support from Hezbollah. And then we've got the Mahdi army having traveled to Lebanon to receive training from Hezbollah. We've got Iraqi militia fighters receiving training in Lebanon. And officials say a much smaller number of Hezbollah fighters have also traveled through Syria and into Iraq to provide training. Mahdi's army, now 40,000, making it a especially formidable force. And we got people like Christine Amanpour talking about Ahmadinejad saying, well, he's just like us. He's just like us. It's just people they want to live in freedom and they want to have justice and democracy around the world. I'm going to play some of that audio for you. Let's squeeze a call in here. 800-876-4123 is the number. Mike, Fort Lauderdale, WFTL, line 10. Mike, you're on the program. Mike's gone. 800-876-4123 is the number. Let's go to, where am I going to? Gene, Lake Worth, Florida, WFTL. Gene, line 7. Gene, you're on the program.
Hey, it's old man Gene. How you doing?
Hey, Gene, good to have you back on the program. What's on your mind?
Well, we haven't fought a real war properly since World War II. We let all our enemies escape. We end our wars indecisively, even though the Koreans still claim that they beat us. We went to other wars and did the same thing. Huge numbers of casualties on the other side, and the enemy thinks that they won. And we are stupid. We let that happen. It's because...
Well, you know, the problem I have, I'm out of time here, Gene, is that we get into this post-Vietnam mindset, and the question is, can we ever win another war? If we accept the fact that we lost Vietnam, when people say, well, you know, that offensive, we didn't lose the Tet Offensive. What happened is after that, we lost the war of the words. We lost the media war. And then we look back and say, oh, this is happening all over again. When you look at 1979 with the Iranian hostage crisis, Jimmy Carter, 444 days, 56 Americans held hostage. We did nothing. We did nothing. And then you've got people like him out there saying, oh, this is the biggest blunder ever in American history. But this thing in and of itself isn't the biggest blunder. It's because of the domino effect of what has happened since Vietnam. We're fighting it all over again. Maybe this time we can turn it around and win it. 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, join me.
The Jerry Doyle Show. Learn more at TalkRadioNetwork.com.
Forget about Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and all this.
Don't you get it, Jerry?
No.
I do get it. No.
Good morning. Civil War, a bloody weekend of sectarian clashes in Iraq.
Terror, horror, death. Film at 11.
Jerry Doyle grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Has a 10-year career on Wall Street. A long list of movie and TV roles, including the character Michael Garibaldi for 110 episodes on the Emmy Award-winning sci-fi series Babylon 5. He's an honorary naval aviator and F-16 test pilot. Impressive. And ran as a Republican for the U.S. House of Representatives in California.
King. Well, I didn't vote for you.
You want to talk politics, pop culture, and current events?
What's your language, you bud? We're on the air.
Let's do it on the Jerry Doyle Show.
Let's do it on the Jerry Doyle Show. JD here, your 6'3" ATM of information. The pin 800-876-4123. Charles and Jesse work in the booth. Dyslexic Doug grabbing your phone calls at 800-876-4123. Emails at the website jerrydoyle.com. The program where intellectual anarchy is encouraged and nurtured. Here's what I'm encouraging. Let's get the troops home right now. We're done. The war is over. For 5 weeks, I have been telling you, battling with you, responding to emails and phone calls that the fix was in back then. When President Bush capitulated in that interview, when asked whether what we were seeing take place in Baghdad was equivalent to the 1968 Tet Offensive, and he said, well, you know, he might have been right about that. That was the time when the fix was in. 5 weeks ago, I had Colonel David Hunt on the program. He's going to be joining us in a little bit, bottom of the hour, to talk to us about the fix being in. Every day, more and more information comes out to prove to you that the fix is in. The war is over for political purposes. They're all running for political cover. People are trying to find ways to position themselves for 2008. I'm reading a story here about Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House. Newt Gingrich now says, after the election, mind you, that the Iraq war is a failure. And unless the Bush administration admits to this failure, it will not be able to enter the third phase, which is to do what? Is to put Doughboy Gingrich in position to be able to tell you that, see, I told you so, and because Bush didn't admit that this was a failure, you need a guy like me to be the president because I'm going to shoot straight with you, even though I didn't shoot straight with you on November 6th, the day before the election. There's a report out, ABC News. Today, Iranian weapons arm Iraqi militia. U.S. officials say today, hey, guess what? We found evidence that there was direct Iranian support for terrorists in Iraq, brand new weapons seized from Iranian factories. The sources say the material is going directly from Iranian factories to Shia militias rather than through the black market. And they say, quote, there is no way this could be done without Iranian government approval. Yet only on Sunday, we had General Abizaid on 60 Minutes saying, let me be very clear about this. Let me be very clear. We are not at war with Iran, even though the correspondent said. So let me get this straight. So we've got the Iranians giving weapons to the militias in Iraq that are killing U.S. soldiers, but we're not at war with Iran. He said, no, we're not at war with Iran. And why would he say that? Because the fix was in. He was told to not make the connection between the United States and Iran. Why did Dick Cheney go to Saudi Arabia? To try and buy time, to say, here's what we need to do, guys, because we're all going to be pulling out soon, and we got to make sure that our interests are protected. Did he go over and try and broker a way to get the Saudis involved to have us win the war in Iraq and Afghanistan? No. He went over there because the fix was in. Condoleezza Rice over there, not spreading democracy, spreading the image that we're over there doing everything we possibly can to put our soldiers in the best position to win the war. Republicans coming out and saying, guess what? I think we should contemplate negotiating directly with Iran and Syria. And 4 months ago, 5 months ago, when Democrats said the very same thing leading up to the midterm elections, the Democrats were accused of being traitors, of being cowards and appeasers and people who want to cut and run, unlike the big brave Republicans who said, no, we're going to stay the course. We're going to stay the course. Well, let's go back and listen to the rhetoric of how we're going to win and how we're going to stay the course and how forthright these Republicans, these conservatives on Capitol Hill are going to be with understanding how we have got to beat back the terrorists. Let's go back and listen to President Bush at the President's Dinner in June in clip 12.
An early withdrawal would embolden al-Qaeda and bin Laden. An early withdrawal before we completed the missions would say to the United States military, your sacrifices is going to vain. There will be no early withdrawal so long as we run the Congress and occupy the White House.
And they cheered. And they cheered. And in clip 11, President Bush at this very same dinner says, you know what? An early withdrawal would be what for the United States of America, President Bush?
An early withdrawal would be a defeat for the United States of America. An early withdrawal would embolden the terrorists. Talk about a deadline before we've done the job sends chills throughout the spines of Iraqi citizens who are wondering whether or not the United States has the capacity to keep its word.
Do you, President Bush? 4th of July, President Bush talking about the sacrifice of 2,527 troops who died in Iraq would not be in vain. Is that not right, President Bush?
I'm going to make you this promise. I'm not going to allow the sacrifice of 2,527 troops who've died in Iraq to be in vain by pulling out before the job is done.
And after the canceled meeting with Maliki, after the 2.5-hour save face meeting with Maliki where they emerged saying, he's the right guy for Iraq, you see. I appreciate the courage you showed during these difficult times as you lead your country. Now, see, we're not going to cut and run. We're going to stay here. We're going to stay here till the mission's done. See, because that's what we do. We don't cut and run. You see, and as long as we're here, we're not going to sacrifice these soldiers' lives in vain. And here's clip one of President Bush today talking at the press conference.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done.
We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done. That's what he said today. Only there was something just a little different that he put in. Here's the truth, that the fix is in.
So long as the government wants us there.
So long as the government wants us there. Jesse, play clip one in its totality, please.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there.
And after that 2.5-hour meeting, they came out and said, look, he's the guy. He's the guy. Al-Maliki said, look, there's no problem here. Everything's good. And what that meeting was all about was they were setting the timetable for when they were telling Maliki that he was going to tell us when it was time for our troops to leave. The fix is in. It has been in for 5 weeks. The peace with honor nonsense that they're talking about. And while politicians are positioning themselves for 2008, while they're trying to clean their hands and somehow distance themselves from this absolute horrific engagement that the military has been asked to participate in and not act like soldiers and not kill people and blow stuff up. These politicians are trying to find a way to somehow make you forget all the promises that were made, all the stuff we were going to do, all the greatness, the democracy that we were going to spread throughout the region. And now here we are, with everyone finding a way, just like this war has been used like a prostitute. Everyone, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, pro-war, anti-war, they have all used this war like a prostitute, and now that they're done with her, they've thrown her to the curb. And that's why I say the troops come home today. 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, your opinion.
Global war on terror. September the 11th. The terrorists hunting down the terrorists. Terror. The terrorists. September the 11th. Terrorism. The war on terror. The terrorists. War on terror. Terrorists. Osama bin Laden. The terrorists. 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 September the 11th, 2001. The terrorists. The terrorists. September the 11th. War on terror. Terrorists and insurgents. Terrorists. The terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists. The terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists. Fight against terror.
Stand up and be heard now on the Jerry Doyle Show.
I know there's a lot of speculation that these reports in Washington mean there's going to be some kind of graceful exit out of Iraq. We're going to stay in Iraq to get the job done, so long as the government wants us there.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
So here's another question for you. Has Iran won the war that the United States hasn't fought with that country? 800-876-4123 is the number. Insofar as we have proof now that the Iranians were equipping terrorists inside Iraq, killing U.S. soldiers, we're not going there. But has Iran won the de facto war? And I understand people are saying we're not at war with Iran, but yet we have Iranian equipment, IEDs, that are killing U.S. soldiers. Apparently, Iran has won the war in the media. Christiana Amanpour on AC360 last night talking with John Roberts in response to the letter, the love letter, that Ahmadinejad has sent off to the people of the United States. Christiana Amanpour talking about what's in the letter, and she wants to stress in this first piece here that it's about our commonalities.
He is not saying a whole lot new. He does stress commonalities between American people and Iranian people. He talks about how both are religious and devout countries and citizens. America Christian and Iran Muslim. He talks about both wanting justice and freedom and democracy at home and around the world.
Justice and freedom and democracy at home and around the world. Wow. That's nice. Very nice. Now, John Roberts asked if there was any truth that Iran is responsible for the violence in Iraq. Listen to her response to that question. It's very important.
True that so many Iraqis have suffered during this war, but isn't it also true, Chris John, that Iran, through its support of some of these Shiite militias, at least indirectly, has been responsible for some of this violence?
Well, certainly that's what the Bush administration believes, and they have been trying to somehow get Iran to cooperate on the whole issue inside Iraq. Iran would say, and has said many, many times, that it just uses its good offices to try to wield its influence with the Shiites in a way that it is not worse even than it is now.
Using its good offices to wield influence with the Shias so that it's not worse than it is right now? And her response is, well, that's what the Bush administration believes. Does anybody not believe that Iran has been supplying weapons to kill soldiers in Iraq? 800-876-4123 is the number. And when you try and make the connection between the peaceful, loving Ahmadinejad in Iran and the peaceful, loving people of the United States, it's always good to bring up moms and kids, isn't it?
He has quite a following. He's something of a folk hero in the developing world. And maybe he thinks that because of the dissatisfaction with the Bush administration as demonstrated by the American voters, that perhaps he can capitalize on that dissatisfaction. And of course, for Iran and for many in the Muslim world, the issue of a Palestinian state and Palestinian rights is paramount. And he doesn't just say what you just read. He also tries to appeal to the humanity of it all. He says, just like American mothers and Iranian mothers, Palestinian mothers also suffer when they see their children killed.
Do you think he's trying to capitalize on the dissatisfaction with President Bush? Dissatisfaction with the administration? The election? 800-876-4123 is the number. I've got the love letter for Ahmadinejad. I'll talk with you first at 800-876-4123. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Mike, WFTL, line 10. Mike, you're on the program.
Hi. Thank you. What a sick woman that Christiane Amanpour is. Unfortunately, the chain of command, Bush is not somewhere down the chain of command. He's on top of it. All of these things are happening because he issues orders to the generals, and this is all by design. I don't think the people running our country ever had any intention of winning anything over there. They issue orders to our troops. They have been doing it for years that are 100% opposite of what it takes to win a counterinsurgency. And unfortunately, the sad reality is that they have created a situation where they're going to have a bunch of Shiite lunatic governments from Beirut to Tehran. And I think they did it by design. And these groups are also aligned with Hamas. Condoleezza Rice is over there telling the Israelis to commit suicide, basically. And I think that's what this is all about.
Well, we say, well, that's what this is all about. What ultimately is it all about? Financial interest, corporate interest, nation building?
Yeah, I think they've been making a lot of money off defense contracts. You know, you have people who've called and mentioned Vietnam and the Tet Offensive. You know, Bush was just in Vietnam, and the corporate, the people that run our country, the corporate families and so forth, they've been making a fortune trading with Vietnam for several years now. And what did we have people die over there for when you look at that? And is that, I mean, if you want to know what's going on in this country, Jerry, read the book America's Secret Establishment. It's just as good as David Hunt's book, I promise you.
Well, you know, when the secret establishment, there's always been this, cabal of internationalism, and I believe Bush is a complete and total globalist, and I believe that people have been getting rich on the back of this war. Unfortunately, there's an article that came out today, Halliburton going to pay $8 million to settle Army fraud claims. We know about the no-bid contracts. There are always people that are going to, take advantage of the situation. I can't, and again, this might sound naive, Mike, but I don't think Bush is the puppeteer. I think he's the puppet. I think he is getting his strings pulled by people who don't have his best interest at heart. I do believe he cares about the soldiers. I do believe he cares about winning, but I don't think he's surrounded with people that are giving him the information and the tools that he needs to go forth and do that.
Unfortunately, he's a member of one of these ruling families. He's hit the Bushes, the Rockefellers, the Harrimans. These families have run this country for years. We don't have a true democracy over here. He's part of the establishment. He and John Kerry are both members of the Order in Skull and Bones. But what I want to submit to you, and this is a fact, believe it or not, a couple weeks ago it came out that U.S. GIs who were severely wounded in Iraq are being experimented on with a drug that has been used for hemophiliacs, and over 1,000 have been injected with this drug, and there was a report by the FDA last December that it creates death and injury. In other words, they're basically being tortured in Nazi-like medical experiments, and Bush... if you want to know what's going on in this country, Jerry, read the book America's Secret Establishment. It's just as good as David Hunt's book, I promise you.
Well, when the secret establishment, there's always been this, cabal of internationalism, and I believe Bush is a complete and total globalist, and I believe that people have been getting rich on the back of this war. Unfortunately, there's an article that came out today, Halliburton going to pay $8 million to settle Army fraud claims. We know about the no-bid contracts. There are always people that are going to, take advantage of the situation. I can't, and again, this might sound naive, Mike, but I don't think Bush is the puppeteer. I think he's the puppet. I think he is getting his strings pulled by people who don't have his best interest at heart. I do believe he cares about the soldiers. I do believe he cares about winning, but I don't think he's surrounded with people that are giving him the information and the tools that he needs to go forth and do that.
Unfortunately, he's a member of one of these ruling families. He's hit the Bushes, the Rockefellers, the Harrimans. These families have run this country for years. We don't have a true democracy over here. He's part of the establishment. He and John Kerry are both members of the Order in Skull and Bones. But what I want to submit to you, and this is a fact, believe it or not, a couple weeks ago it came out that U.S. GIs who were severely wounded in Iraq are being experimented on with a drug that has been used for hemophiliacs, and over 1,000 have been injected with this drug, and there was a report by the FDA last December that it creates death and injury. In other words, they're basically being tortured in Nazi-like medical experiments, and Bush...
Well, I mean, I've heard these stories, Mike, and I can't buy them until something down the line. Do I agree that Bush is a connected guy? Absolutely. Kerry, the list goes on. There's a reason we have career politicians. There's a reason that certain people get elected. And I've made this point about President Bush. If people think that they had a choice of who they were going to vote for as the Republican nominee or the Democrat nominee, they don't have a choice. The choice is made for by people who understand that by putting people in positions of power that have connections to people of influence, business as usual continues ad nauseum. I understand that the rich get richer. There are always going to be opportunists out there. One thing I will say about President Bush, having met him, I know him just a small amount. And when he talks about the troops, I don't think that in his core, Mike, that if he knew something like that was going on, that he would ever allow that to happen. Because I believe, as ineffective as he might be as a commander-in-chief, and as ineffective as he might be as the President of the United States in a lot of policy areas, I don't believe he's an evil person. 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle, stick with me.
The Jerry Doyle Show.
True that so many Iraqis have suffered during this war, but isn't it also true, Chris John, that Iran, through its support of some of these Shiite militias, at least indirectly, has been responsible for some of this violence?
Well, certainly that's what the Bush administration believes.
Certainly that's what the Bush administration believes. Christiana on 4 on Anderson Cooper 360. As one of the callers said, she's a very sick woman. And CNN is a very sick organization, with the exception of Lou Dobbs. I like his program. I like him. I like what he stands for. He and I disagree in some areas. But CNN has got this love affair with all things evil and a hatred for most things good. I'm going to compare President Bush here. There is such hatred out there for President Bush. Absolute deep-seated hatred for President Bush. Why is that? Why do people hate President Bush? They hate him for everything. Hurricane Katrina, Bob Beckel, Democrat advisors out there saying during the last election, well, he had, and the Republicans had hurricanes lined up from here to November to help them get elected. I mean, where does that come from? Where does the hatred in Hollywood come from? The drunken Danny DeVito trying to promote his movie on the View, coming out and doing his drunken Bush impersonations. Where does the hatred come from for President Bush? He can't be that bad. He can't be that evil. Is he incompetent with borders? Absolutely. Is he incompetent with fiscal issues? Please, don't even need to call on that one. But where does the hatred come from? The hatred should be directed at people that deserve our hate. People who, like Ahmadinejad, are using his government to get weapons into Iraq to kill U.S. soldiers. But Amanpour is saying, well, that's what the Bush administration says. She's talking about the letter that was sent by Ahmadinejad to the American people. And when you listen to this letter, I'm just going to give you some of the excerpts of it. It's about 6 pages. But when you listen to this letter, this is a seduction. CNN has already been seduced by Ahmadinejad, already been seduced by others of like mind. They've been seduced. The people that are the Islamo-fascists, the Ahmadinejads of the world, the Nasrallahs of the world, the al-Sadrs of the world, they already know how to seduce CNN. Then they know that CNN is going to turn around and try and seduce the American people by passing along this information in a way that completely takes away what would be or should be your immediate shields of defense, where you say, no, I see what you're trying to do. I'm not going to allow it to happen. There's a movie coming out in a couple of weeks, some love story. I'm not going to be seduced by you. I don't have time. I'm only here in London for a couple of weeks. I'm not going to be seduced by you. But the seducers keep coming after you and coming after you and coming after you. They'll try different tactics. And what Ahmadinejad is doing right now is positioning himself to have power in Iran, power in Iraq, power over Iraq, and then using that combined power and the hatred of Bush to seduce the American people into making Bush look like a stark, raving lunatic. Because in his speech, he was talking about the axis of evil, his State of the Union address. He was talking about how he wanted to reach out to the Iranian people. Do you remember the State of the Union address? And we did a little funny thing with it. Jesse said, well, a lot of people who hate Bush would run President Bush's comments about the people of Iran through their Bush-hating filters, and it would sound a little bit like this.
Tonight, let me speak directly to the citizens of Iran. America respects you, and we respect your country. We respect your right to choose your own future and win your own freedom. And our nation hopes one day to be the closest of friends with a free and democratic Iran.
That's what people who hate Bush hear when he speaks. Completely different scenario. When you think of Ahmadinejad, Holocaust, big myth, come on. Maybe a couple of Jews got whacked, not 6 million if it happened at all. Israel, wipe it off the map. But then CNN, Amanpour, and the love fest that they have for these guys want to promote this letter. Here's the love letter that comes from Ahmadinejad to the American people. And listen throughout this for the word noble. And he is seducing the American people with this letter. Noble Americans, were we not faced with the activities of the U.S. administration in this part of the world and the negative ramifications of those activities on the daily lives of our peoples, coupled with the many wars and calamities caused by the U.S. administration, as well as the tragic consequences of U.S. interference in our other countries, were the American people not God-fearing, truth-loving, and justice-seeking, while the U.S. administration actively conceals the truth and impedes any objective portrayal of current realities? If it were, we did not share a common responsibility to promote and to protect freedom and human dignity and integrity, then there would have been little urgency to have a dialogue with you. While divine providence has placed Iran and the United States geographically far apart, we should be cognizant that human values and our common human spirit, which proclaim the dignity and exalted worth of all human beings, have brought our two great nations of Iran and the United States closer together. Both our nations are God-fearing, truth-loving, and justice-seeking, and both seek dignity, respect, and perfection. Both greatly value and readily embrace the promotion of human ideals such as compassion, empathy, respect for the rights of human beings, securing justice and equality, and defending the innocent and the weak against oppressors and bullies. We are all inclined towards the good and towards extending a helping hand to one another, particularly to those in need. We all deplore injustice, the trampling of people's rights and the intimidation and humiliation of human beings. We all detest darkness and deceit, lies and distortion, and seek and admire salvation and enlightenment, sincerity and honesty. The pure human essence of the two great nations of Iran and the United States testify to the veracity of these statements. Noble Americans, our nation has always extended its hand of friendship to all other nations of the world. Hundreds of thousands of my Iranian compatriots are living amongst you in friendship and peace and are contributing positively to your society. Our people have been in contact with you over the past many years and have maintained these contacts despite the unnecessary restrictions of the U.S. authorities. As mentioned, we have common concerns, face similar challenges, and are pained by the sufferings and afflictions in the world. We, like you, are aggrieved by the ever-worsening pain and misery of the Palestinian people. Persistent aggressions by the Zionists are making life more and more difficult for the rightful owners of the land of Palestine. In broad daylight, in front of cameras and before the eyes of the world, they are bombarding innocent, defenseless civilians, bulldozing houses, firing machine guns and students in streets and alleys, and subjecting their families to endless grief. Noble Americans, you have heard that the U.S. administration is kidnapping its presumed opponents from across the globe and arbitrarily holding them without trial or any international supervision in horrendous prisons. You have certainly heard the sad stories of the Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib prisons. The U.S. administration attempts to justify them through its proclaimed, quote, war on terror. But everyone knows that such behavior, in fact, offends global opinion, exasperates resentment, and thereby spreads terrorism and tarnishes the U.S. image and its credibility among nations. I have no doubt that the American people do not approve of this behavior and indeed deplore it. Undoubtedly, the American people are not satisfied with this behavior, and they showed their discontent in recent elections. I hope that in the wake of the midterm elections, the administration of President Bush will have heard and will heed the message of the American people. My questions are the following. Is there not a better approach to governance? Is it not possible to put wealth and power in the service of peace and stability, prosperity, and the happiness of all peoples through a commitment to justice and respect for the rights of all nations, instead of aggression and war? We all condemn terrorism because its victims are the innocent. If the U.S. government meets the current domestic and external challenges with an approach based on truth and justice, it can remedy some of the past afflictions and alleviate some of the global resentment and hatred of America. But if the approach remains the same, I would not be unexpected that the American people would similarly reject the new electoral winners, although the recent elections, rather than reflecting a victory, in reality pointing to failure of the current administration policies. These issues have been extensively dealt with within my letter to President Bush earlier this year. To sum it up, it is possible to lead the world towards the aspired perfection by adhering to unity, monotheism, morality, and spirituality, and drawing upon the teachings of the divine prophets. Then the American people, who are God-fearing and followers of divine religions, will overcome every difficulty. What I stated represents some of my anxieties and concerns. I am confident that you, the American people, will play an instrumental role in the establishment of justice and spirituality throughout the world. The promises of the Almighty and His prophets will certainly be realized. Justice and truth will prevail, and all nations will live a true life in a climate replete with love, with compassion, and fraternity. I pray to the Almighty to bless the Iranian and American nations and indulge nations of the world with dignity and success. To my noble Americans. Are you buying the seduction? 800-876-4123. Jerry Doyle. Join me.
Believe me that Zionism is on its deathbed. The era of occupation is over, and all the freedom-loving people of the world are shouting for the death of Zionism.
Ah, yes. The real message coming from Ahmadinejad, death to the Jews, death to Israel. And, folks, he just doesn't plan on stopping there. Now, while the seduction letter went out to the noble Americans and to the CNNs and the Christiana Amanpours that are buying all this nonsense and making Bush look like the bad guy, here's the bad news about what we're really up against. It isn't about working together. It's not about God-fearing and justice-seeking. It's not about the Iranians living amongst us that are just like you and I. It's not about truth. It's not about perfection. It's not about respect for human rights, because these are all lies coming from him. The truth comes from Fawad Hussein, perhaps the most definitive outline of the jihadist master plan. The book's called Al-Zarqawi, the second generation of al-Qaeda. When you read this book and you realize how close recent events seem to be almost dovetailing in with this forecast, it's frightening. The master plan began September 11th with a stage Hussein calls the Awakening. The ideologues within al-Qaeda believed that the Islamic nation was in a state of hibernation because of repeated catastrophes inflicted upon Muslims by the West. By striking America, quote, the head of the serpent, al-Qaeda caused the United States to, quote, lose consciousness, act chaotically against those who attacked it. This entitled the party that hit the serpent to lead the Islamic nation. The first stage, says Hussein, ended in 2001 when American troops entered Baghdad. The second stage, eye-opening, will be the last until the end of 2006. Iraq will become the recruiting ground for young men eager to attack America. Al-Qaeda will move from being an organization to a mushrooming, invincible, and popular trend. The third stage, arising and standing up, will last from 2007 to 2010. Al-Qaeda's focus will be on Syria and Turkey, but it will also begin to directly confront Israel in order to gain more credibility among the Muslim population. The fourth stage, lasting in 2013, al-Qaeda will bring about the demise of Arab governments. The creeping loss of the regime's power will lead to a steady growth and strength within al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, attacks against Middle East petroleum industries will continue. The American power will deteriorate through the constant expansion of the circle of confrontation. By then, writes Hussein, al-Qaeda will have completed its electronic capabilities, and it will be time to use them to launch electronic attacks to undermine the U.S. economy. Islamists will promote the idea of using gold as the international medium of exchange, leading to the collapse of the dollar, which, as you saw yesterday, hit a 15-year low. Then an Islamic caliphate can be declared, inaugurating the fifth stage of al-Qaeda's grand plan, which will last until 2016. At this stage, the Western fist in the Arab region will loosen, and Israel will not be able to carry out preemptive or cautionary strikes. The international balance will change. Al-Qaeda and the Islamic movement will attract powerful new allies such as who? China and Europe will fall into disunity. The sixth stage, the sixth phase, will be a period of what they call total confrontation. The now established caliphate will form an Islamic army and will instigate a worldwide fight between the believers and the non-believers, and Hussein proclaims the world will then know the meaning of real terrorism. 800-876-4123 is the number. I don't have time to do it today, but tomorrow I will, if you do have a hatred of President Bush, if you have a deep-seated hatred of President Bush, I can help you to understand why you have it, and I can also help you to get over it. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that don't want to get over it, but there's a reason you hate George Bush. It's not because of Iraq. It's not because of the borders. It's not because of amnesty. It's not because of fiscal spending out of control. It's not because he can't pronounce nuclear. And it's not because the fact that he went from Yale to Yale. It's none of those things. It goes much deeper than that, and it has something to do with you. And we'll do that tomorrow on the program. In the meantime, we'll talk with you at 800-876-4123. That's the number. Charles in California, KNEW, line 9. Charles, thanks for holding.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment about Lieutenant Colonel Hunt's perception. He's incorrect. Generals are fired. They're not fired. They're retired. If you look at the major generals who were division commanders who did not make 3-star and the 1-stars who did not make 2-star, they were fired, but they were politely told they could retire instead. Those are the ones who are fired. And also, I just don't understand how Lieutenant Colonel Hunt comes up with all these philosophies. He never was a ground combat commander. He was a military intelligence officer. And retiring as a lieutenant colonel and a military intelligence officer is about being like a Wendy's supervisor or manager. He just has no credibility.
What do you mean no credibility? The guy, he's been in front of troops, been in Vietnam, career soldier, 29 years, served in Vietnam. How do you say that he has no credibility?
He was never a ground combatant commander. He was a military intelligence officer. He didn't lead troops in battle. He was a support person. And he acts like initially he started out trying to talk about being a special operations person years ago, and he wasn't. So he doesn't have all this expertise that he talks about. He never was a combatant commander, a ground combatant commander. His greatest claim to fame is he wrote a book, and you're enthralled with him. You refer to him as colonel. He's a lieutenant colonel. And then he was forced to retire also. Again,
well, if I have a 4-star on, I just go general. I don't go 4-star general, 3-star general, 1-star general, brigadier general, major. I don't go that way. I just go lieutenant colonel as a colonel. To trash Colonel Hunt, I don't understand what the deal here is, Charles. What are you trying to accomplish? I know he's commanded personnel while he was in Vietnam. I know he's watched his buddies die. I know he saved the lives of people that he served with. I know he spends his own personal time getting involved in the soldiers' lives. Why the hatred for this guy?
There's no hatred. It's just a simple fact. You refuse to acknowledge that he was never a ground combatant commander. He was a military intelligence officer. He may have been a company commander in a military intelligence unit, but these are not ground combatant commanders. These are not people humping a ruck and eating dirt. And you.
All right. Well, I can tell you, Charles, that you're wrong, because I've had conversations with him that he does not want to share with people about his experiences in Vietnam, the things that he did and the things that he had to do to save other people's lives. The guy's a hero. And in my opinion, Charles, anybody that has served in the military is a hero. And to say just because, you know what, Charles, your argument is invalid about people who say, well, John Kerry only served for 4 months in Vietnam. To me, that's a stupid argument, just like yours. John Kerry went to Vietnam. Whether he went there with an agenda or not, that's for him to settle in his own heart. But I do know that people say he was only there for 4 months, 4 hours, 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years. If you go and serve, you have the right to have an opinion about the war. Colonel Hunt is a guy who has served and has served admirably, and his only concern, whether you have concerns about what he did during the war, is that his concern is that he doesn't want to see people die for any other reason than for winning. And right now, his concern is that we do not have the winning mindset. He does, Charles. I just wish you wouldn't go down that road. Jerry Doyle, I got to go.
The Jerry Doyle Show. Go to TalkRadioNetwork.com for more information.